I shouldn't have gone past the sign. The locals were clear about it. No one said why, just a quiet shake of the head, a look that lingered too long. The stretch of beach past the black rocks was not for tourists. So I went anyway. It was early, the tide was low, the air smelled clean, sharp with salt and something faintly metallic underneath. The sand out there was darker, finer. It clung to my feet like it didn't want to let go. That's where I found it, half buried near the waterline. A shell, small, iridescent. Its surface shimmered with colors that didn't quite exist, greens folding into purples, blues that seemed too deep for daylight. It was warm. That should have been my first warning. I picked it up anyway. It pulsed, just once. I told myself it was the sun. I brought it back with me. The fever started that night. Low at first, a dull ache behind my eyes, heat pooling under my skin. I blamed the sun, the dehydration, the long flight. By morning, it was worse. My chest felt tight, not pain, pressure, like something was lodged just beneath my ribs, pushing outward. I pressed my fingers there. A lump, hard, too defined to be swelling. I laughed under my breath, nervous, great, perfect timing. But it didn't feel like anything I'd had before. It felt placed. The shell sat on the nightstand. I hadn't touched it since. But it looked different now, duller, as if something had been taken out of it. The surface had collapsed slightly inward, soft where it had once been rigid. I didn't like looking at it. The second night, I couldn't sleep. The fever burned hotter, sweat soaked through the sheets, clinging cold against my skin. My breathing felt shallow, uneven. That pressure in my chest had grown, sharper now, more present. I sat up, my hand pressed against my ribs, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I heard it. A faint sound. Tap. I froze. Tap, tap. It came from inside me. I held my breath. Silence. Then scratch, soft, rhythmic, from beneath my ribs. My stomach twisted violently. I staggered to the bathroom, gripping the sink as the room tilted. "No," I whispered, but the word felt useless. I pressed harder against the lump. It moved. Not much, just enough, like something shifting away from the pressure. My fingers jerked back as if burned. The scratching came again, faster this time, more deliberate. I went to a clinic the next morning. The waiting room smelled sterile, sharp with antiseptic. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too steady. I tried to explain it. The shell, the lump, the sound. The nurse gave me a tight smile. "Probably an infection," she said. "We'll run some scans." I sat there, hunched forward, arms wrapped around myself, trying to stay still. But I couldn't, because every time I moved, it reacted. A faint, irritated scratching, like it didn't like being disturbed. When they called my name, I stood too quickly. The room swayed, my vision narrowing for a second. I followed them down the hall. Cold air, white walls, the smell stronger here. They had me lie down, lift my shirt. The doctor pressed lightly against my ribs. I flinched. "There," I said quickly, "that's where." He paused, his fingers stilled. I watched his expression shift, subtle, controlled. "Do you feel that?" I asked, my voice tight. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed again. The thing inside me moved, sharp, violent. I gasped, my back arching off the table. The scratching erupted, loud now, desperate, trying. The doctor stepped back, too fast. "What is it?" I demanded. But he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the monitor. I turned my head. Grainy, blackened light image. My ribs, my lungs, and there, inside, something curled in my chest. Not a tumor, not a mass. Segmented, coiled, alive. It twitched, then slowly uncoiled, pressing outward, towards the surface. The scratching turned into something else, a dull, repeated knocking, like it had found direction, like it knew where it wanted to go. I couldn't breathe. "Get it out," I choked. "Please, just get it out." The doctor didn't move. No one did. They were all staring, because the monitor shifted. The thing inside me stretched further, longer than it should have been able to, reaching upward, towards my chest, towards my throat, toward... The faintest sound escaped my lips, a wet, broken gasp, because I could feel it now. Not just scratching, not just moving, climbing, searching. And as my vision blurred and the room tilted sideways, I understood too late. It wasn't trying to get out. It was trying to get home, through me. We didn't mean to find it. The GPS had been wrong all day, rerouting us through narrower roads, then dirt, then something that barely qualified as a path. The sun was already setting when the trees opened up and we saw it. A resort, perfectly lit, warm, inviting, like it had been waiting. My wife laughed softly. "Well, that's lucky." I didn't answer. There hadn't been anything on the map. No signs, no turn-off, just there. We pulled in anyway. The air felt different the moment we stepped out of the car. Warmer, still. The smell of the forest vanished, replaced by something clean and faintly sweet, like linen and polished wood. A man in a crisp uniform greeted us at the entrance. "Welcome," he said, smiling too easily. "We've been expecting you." I felt something tighten in my chest. "We didn't have a reservation," I said. "You do now." He stepped aside. The lobby was bright, too bright, chandeliers casting soft golden light over polished floors that reflected everything perfectly. No dust, no imperfections. A woman approached us with a clipboard. "Long drive?" she asked, her tone gentle, familiar. My wife nodded. "Yeah, Room 214, the woman said, already writing. King bed, ocean view. Your daughter prefers the left side, closer to the window." We both froze. We hadn't mentioned our daughter. She stood behind us, quiet, holding her stuffed rabbit. "How did you—" "Dinner is served until 9, the woman continued smoothly. "No peanuts in your meals. We're aware of the allergy." My wife's hand tightened around mine. We hadn't told them that either. We didn't ask more questions. We took the key. The room was perfect, too perfect. Our bags sat neatly at the foot of the bed, unzipped, clothes already hung in the closet. My daughter's rabbit rested on the pillow, positioned just the way she liked it. "I didn't unpack," my wife whispered. "Neither did I." The air smelt faintly of something sweet, something familiar, but I couldn't place it. Dinner was waiting, exactly what we would have ordered before we even sat down. The staff moved quietly, efficient, always smiling, always watching. I started to notice the other guests. There weren't many. Couples, a few individuals. No one had luggage, not a suitcase, not a bag, nothing. They sat still, eating slowly, mechanically. One man lifted his fork the same way each time, perfectly repeated. I leaned toward my wife. "Do you see that?" She nodded, her face pale. "They're not talking," she whispered. They weren't. Not to each other, not to the staff, just eating. That night I couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet. I got up, careful not to wake my family, and stepped outside. The hallway stretched long and empty. The lights hummed faintly overhead. I followed the signs to the exit. The doors opened easily. Cool air brushed against my face. Relief hit me fast. I stepped outside and stopped. The parking lot was gone. In its place, the lobby, bright, warm, unchanged. I turned back. The hallway was gone too. Just the front desk, the same man standing there, smiling. "Sir," he said calmly, "the exit is not available at this time." My mouth drew dry. "What do you mean?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly. "Guests who arrive by accident often feel disoriented. It's part of the transition." A cold weight settled in my stomach. To transition to what? He didn't answer. Instead, he slid something across the counter. A set of car keys. Mine. I stared at them. They were bent, blackened. The plastic melted along one edge. My fingers trembled as I picked them up. The smell hit me. Burnt rubber, smoke, memory, flashing lights, the sound of metal folding inward, my daughter's voice. Then nothing. "No," I whispered. The man's smile didn't change. "Take your time," he said softly. "Most guests need it." Behind me I heard footsteps, slow, familiar. I turned. My wife stood there, but her expression, it wasn't confusion, it wasn't fear, it was calm, too calm. "They've been taking good care of us," she said gently. My chest tightened. "What are you talking about? We need to leave." "To leave, there's nowhere to go." Our daughter stepped beside her, clutching the rabbit. "They already know what we need," she added quietly. The lights flickered just once, and for a split second everything changed. The walls peeled away, the brightness dimmed, the smell of sweetness vanished, replaced by something else, cold, sterile, and underneath it, decay. Shapes filled the space where guests had been, not moving, not breathing, just waiting. Then the light steadied, the resort returned, perfect again, untouched. The man behind the desk watched me closely. Some guests accept it quickly, he said. Others take longer. My grip tightened around the keys, the edges digging into my palm. I looked at my family, at the way they stood, too still, too comfortable. And that's when I noticed something that made my breath catch in my throat. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking past me, toward the entrance, as if they were waiting for the next guests to arrive. I took the flyer because it felt different. Underground history, it said, handwritten, no logo, no website, just a time and a meeting point near a crowded metro entrance. The man who handed it to me smiled like he already knew I'd say yes. He was waiting when I arrived. Tall, well-dressed, too polished for the dust-streaked stone around us. He carried a lantern instead of a flashlight. "Small group tonight," he said warmly. "You'll appreciate the intimacy." There were 5 others, tourists like me, cameras around their necks, sun hats tucked under their arms, nervous laughter as we followed him past the last lit corridor and through a narrow service door marked restricted access. The air changed immediately, cooler, thicker. The smell hit next, damp stone, old metal, something faintly sour beneath it. "This part isn't on any map," the guide said, his voice echoing softly. "Layers of the city built over themselves. History forgets what it buries." We descended a spiral staircase that seemed too long for the space above it. My steps echoed louder than they should have. The lantern's light stretched shadows along the walls, thin and skeletal. At the bottom, the tunnels opened. Arched ceilings, narrow passageways branching in every direction. The walls were lined with old brick and something else. Bones, stacked carefully, arranged like architecture. Someone behind me let out a small laugh. "This is authentic." The guide smiled. "Authenticity is the only thing we offer." We moved deeper. The flame flickered once, then again. "Power fluctuation?" someone asked. "We don't rely on power, only memory." The tunnels narrowed, the air grew colder, my breath started to fog faintly in front of me. I checked my phone. No signal, of course. We stopped at a junction. "Here," the guide said, raising the lantern slightly, "an interesting sight. Late arrivals, unprepared, they followed the wrong path and were never found." The flame dipped. For a second his face fell into shadow. "They died quietly," he continued, disoriented, listening for footsteps that never came. A tight feeling settled in my chest. "That actually happened?" someone asked.
The guide tilted his head. "It is happening." A few of us laughed, uneasy. I didn't. The lantern flickered harder now. The light thinned, pulling the shadows longer, deeper. We kept walking. I started to lose track of turns, left, right, down another set of steps. The tunnels began to feel the same, repeating themselves in subtle ways. The sounds changed too. Our footsteps didn't echo correctly anymore. There were too many of them, or not enough. "Another account," the guide said, his voice softer now. "A group much like yours. They ventured too far. One began to notice the silence. The others noticed something else." "What?" someone asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lifted the lantern higher. The flame guttered, almost out. I turned around, just to check, to count. 5 of us, I told myself, 6 including the guide. But the light shifted, and the shapes behind me weren't right. They stood too still, too rigid, their outlines wrong. I raised my phone, using the screen as light, and my breath caught in my throat. They weren't people anymore. They were skeletons, dust-covered, fragile, leaning where they stood, still wearing the same cameras, the same hats. One had its arm half raised, as if it had been mid-gesture when it stopped. My fingers trembled. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "No," I whispered. I turned back. The guide was watching me, smiling. The lantern flickered one last time, casting his face in a thin, wavering glow. "They realized too late," he said calmly, "that history does not record the past." The flame dimmed further. It consumes the present. The darkness pressed closer. I staggered back, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Where are the others?" I choked. The guide stepped forward. His footsteps didn't make a sound. "They are still here," he said softly, "as you will be." The lantern went out. Total darkness swallowed everything. For a moment there was nothing, no light, no sound. Then a faint click. My phone. The screen lit up in my shaking hand. A notification. No signal, no sender, just text. Tour archived. The light flickered weakly across the tunnel walls, and as I turned slowly, my breath shallow, my pulse hammering, I realized I couldn't hear my own footsteps anymore. But somewhere in the darkness behind me, something was still counting them.